You know, we all like to believe we're stronger than certain temptations. We tell ourselves there are lines we'll never cross, things we'd never even consider. But I've learned that life has a way of testing you in places you never thought you were vulnerable. And sometimes, the line you swore you'd never cross isn't where you thought it was. For me, it started so small, so harmless. A moment that didn't even feel like a moment, not at first. Just a glance, a smile, a simple conversation. Nothing dangerous, nothing inappropriate. At least that's what I told myself. But looking back, that was the first crack. The first tiny fracture in the wall I had spent years building around myself. Because after that moment, everything shifted. Slowly, quietly. And before I knew it, I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't come back from. I was lonely. God, I was so lonely. My husband, Victor, he was never really there. Always working, always tired, always somewhere else, even when he was sitting right beside me. And somewhere along the way, I just stopped trying, stopped hoping, stopped feeling like I mattered. I had become invisible in my own marriage. And then there was Liam. Liam wasn't just anybody. He was Victor's son, my stepson. 22 years old, fresh out of college, back home to save some money. He was handsome, confident, and he made me feel like I was seen again. Like I was wanted. Like I still existed. And that kind of attention, when you've been starving for it for years, it does something to you. I kept telling myself it was innocent. That he was just being kind, that I was reading too much into it. But deep down I knew. I knew where this was headed. And yet, I didn't stop it. Maybe I didn't want to. The night it happened, it was just the two of us in the house. Victor was out of town, like always. Liam and I were sitting in the kitchen, talking, drinking a little wine. The conversation started harmless, but it didn't stay that way. The things he said, the way he looked at me, it was like every part of me that had been numb for so long was suddenly awake. And then he leaned in, his voice low, his eyes locked on mine. He said, "Don't fight it, just come for me." That was it. That one sentence. That one whisper in the dark. And in that moment, every line I swore I would never cross shattered into pieces. I let him. God help me, I let him. Even now, after all this time, I still don't know what that makes me. Was I the one who was seduced? Or was I the one who allowed it? Was I the victim or the one who wanted it all along? I still don't have the answer. But what I do know is that once it started, there was no stopping it. And the consequences of that night, they followed me long after the moment was over. If you think you're ready to hear everything that happened next, subscribe to Crossing Lines. Because the stories I tell here aren't for the faint of heart. These are the secrets people carry with them for the rest of their lives. I guess to really understand how it got to that point, you need to know what my life looked like before Liam moved in. Victor and I had been married for almost 12 years at that point. On paper, we had a good life. A nice house in the suburbs. 2 cars. A stable income. The kind of life people envy from the outside looking in. But behind closed doors, there was nothing left between us. Victor had always been focused on his career. Early mornings, late nights, business trips that stretched longer every time. At first, I told myself it was temporary. That once his company stabilized, we'd get our time together. That he'd come back to me. But the years kept passing, and he kept drifting further away. Physically, emotionally, mentally. He was always somewhere else. And I was left here, alone, waiting for scraps of attention that never came. We tried, in the beginning. I tried. Date nights that he canceled last minute because of a client emergency. Conversations that turned into one-sided monologues. I'd pour my heart out, hoping he'd notice how much I was hurting, but his eyes would glaze over, and he'd check his phone. Always his phone. And slowly, something inside me began to wither. The hardest part wasn't even the loneliness. It was the invisibility. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was just there, Someone who made sure the house stayed clean, who handled the bills, who kept up appearances at family events. I could have disappeared, and I don't think he would have noticed. We never had children together. Not because I didn't want to. I did. But Victor always said it wasn't the right time. Maybe next year, he'd say, every year. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. So when Liam came to live with us after finishing college, I didn't expect much. I barely knew him, to be honest. He had grown up mostly with his mother after Victor's first marriage ended. We'd see him a few times a year during the holidays or quick visits. But now he was back, and living under our roof. I remember the first day he arrived. He walked through the door with 2 duffel bags, wearing that easy, confident smile. His energy filled the house in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Liam was nothing like his father. Where Victor was cold and distant, Liam was warm, present. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. At first, it was just nice having someone else around. The house felt less empty. We'd make small talk in the mornings over coffee, little jokes while watching TV in the evenings. And unlike Victor, Liam listened. He asked questions. He cared about my answers. I hadn't realized how hungry I was for simple conversation until I had it again. But it didn't stop there. The way he looked at me, it was different. It wasn't the detached politeness you'd expect from a stepson. It was something else. His eyes lingered a little too long. His compliments came a little too easily. He'd say things like, "You look beautiful today, Isabelle," with a softness in his voice that sent tiny shivers through me. At first, I brushed it off. He was young, charming, probably harmless. I told myself he was just being sweet. But deep down, I felt it. That spark. That dangerous little pull between us. And Liam knew exactly what he was doing. He started finding reasons to be close to me. Offering to help me cook dinner. Standing behind me, reaching over my shoulder just a little too closely. His breath warm against my neck. His hand brushing mine when we passed dishes back and forth. Every touch felt like a test. One I kept failing by not pulling away. Victor, of course, was oblivious. He barely noticed anything these days. He'd come home from his trips, offer a distracted kiss on the cheek, and bury himself in his laptop for the rest of the evening. The 3 of us would eat dinner together, but it was like Victor wasn't even there. The conversations were always between me and Liam. Victor would just nod occasionally, barely listening. The house itself reflected what was happening. Beautiful on the outside, cold on the inside. The walls were painted in soft, neutral colors that felt more like a hotel than a home. Everything perfectly arranged, but lifeless. No laughter. No warmth. Just silence filled with unspoken resentment and distance. And in that silence, Liam's voice grew louder in my life. He started texting me during the day. Little things at first. Memes. Funny stories from work. Then it got more personal. "You looked really good in that dress last night. I like seeing you smile again. I wish he paid more attention to you." He was saying things I had been desperate to hear for years. Things Victor never said anymore. I should have stopped it. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't, because in those moments I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, desired, alive. The truth is, I was starving. Not for sex, but for affection. For connection. For someone to notice me, to care, to make me feel like I mattered again. And Liam. He offered all of that without me even asking. There was this one evening that stands out in my mind. Victor was out of town again. Liam and I were in the living room watching a movie. We were sitting close, too close, but neither of us moved. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't bring myself to create space between us. And then, during a quiet scene, I felt his hand gently rest on my thigh. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Just left it there, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every nerve in my body was on fire. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. The guilt, the excitement, the fear, the craving for more. I kept telling myself that this was dangerous, that I had to pull away. But deep down, another part of me didn't want to. I was dancing on the edge of something I knew could destroy everything. But in that moment, destruction didn't scare me. The emptiness did. And that was the beginning of the end. It all really shifted the night of our anniversary. Victor and I were supposed to have dinner reservations. Our 12th anniversary. I had made the plans myself, weeks in advance. Picked out a beautiful little restaurant downtown, one we hadn't been to in years. I bought a new dress, soft blue silk, simple but elegant. I wanted, maybe foolishly, to feel special again, even if just for one night. I got my hair done that afternoon. Put on makeup I hadn't worn in months. I stared at myself in the mirror before leaving the house, trying to remind myself that I was still desirable. Still worth something. But about an hour before we were supposed to leave, Victor called. He sounded rushed, like always. Honey, I'm so sorry. The meeting with the client's running over. I'm not gonna make it. We'll do something this weekend, okay? He didn't even wait for me to respond before hanging up. I stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at my reflection. All dressed up with nowhere to go. And that's when the familiar weight settled back in my chest. That same emptiness that had been gnawing at me for years. But this time, I wasn't entirely alone. Liam must have heard the conversation from the hallway because a few minutes later, he gently knocked on my bedroom door. You okay? He asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. I tried to smile, brushing it off. Yeah. Just another busy workday for your dad. His eyes dropped down, taking me in for a moment. Wow, Isabelle. You look absolutely stunning. I felt my cheeks flush instantly. Thank you, Liam. That's sweet. He hesitated for a second before speaking again. If you don't want to waste the night, why don't I take you out? I mean, no pressure. But you deserve to still have a nice evening. I should have said no. I should have politely thanked him and spent the evening alone like I always did. But instead, I heard myself say, you know what? That sounds nice. We ended up at a cozy little wine bar a few miles from the house. The kind of place where dim lights hung low and soft jazz played in the background. It was intimate. Almost too intimate. But I told myself it was harmless. The waitress led us to a corner booth, tucked away from most of the other tables. As we settled in, Liam ordered a bottle of red wine for us to share. Conversation came easy. It always did with him. We talked about his college days, his plans for the future, funny childhood stories about Victor that I had never heard before. Somewhere between the second and third glass of wine, the mood shifted. Liam's gaze lingered on me longer than before. His compliments became a little more personal, a little more charged. At one point, I caught him staring. I lowered my eyes and laughed nervously. What? He smiled, shaking his head slightly. You don't even realize how beautiful you are, do you? My breath caught for a moment. I felt my stomach tighten in that familiar mix of flattery and guilt. I tried to dismiss it with another nervous laugh. Liam, don't be silly. But inside, my heart was pounding. Because no one had said that to me in years. Not even close. Victor hadn't looked at me that way since the early days of our marriage. And now here was his son, sitting across from me, saying everything I had secretly longed to hear. As the night went on, the conversation got softer, more intimate. Our legs brushed under the table. Neither of us pulled away. I could feel the tension growing like a low, steady hum between us. We were both aware of it, but neither dared to address it out loud. Eventually, it was time to go. The air outside was cool as we walked to the car. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that's thick with unspoken words. My mind was racing the entire ride, but I kept my gaze fixed out the window, pretending not to notice how many times he glanced over at me. When we pulled into the driveway, Liam parked and got out quickly, circling the car to open my door. Such a simple, polite gesture. But then, as I stepped out, his hand gently rested on the small of my back, guiding me out of the car. It was just a touch. Light. Brief. But it lingered just a second longer than it should have. That brief touch should have meant nothing. But it planted something dangerous. As I walked toward the house, I could still feel the heat of his hand burning through the thin fabric of my dress. My body was on high alert, my senses sharpened, my heart racing. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. And that scared me. I lay awake that night, replaying every moment. Every glance, every word, every accidental touch that wasn't so accidental. I knew where this was heading. I knew the door was opening, slowly but surely. And part of me wanted to slam it shut right then and there. But another part, the part that had been starving for affection, for attention, for something real, that part was wide awake, daring me to let it happen. That night was the beginning of everything that came next. The moment where desire first stepped out of the shadows, no longer content to stay hidden. The days that followed were a storm inside my mind. I kept telling myself to stop. To put distance between us before something irreversible happened. I would stand in front of the mirror, stare at myself, and whisper, "You're his stepmother, Isabelle. What are you doing?" But then that other voice, the quiet, dangerous one, would answer, "He's not your blood. He's an adult. He knows what he's doing. You're both consenting adults." And slowly, my guilt started losing ground to my desire. Victor made it so easy. Like always, he slipped back into his routine as though nothing had happened. The missed anniversary dinner? Forgotten. The new dress I bought? Unnoticed. He barely looked at me when he came home, too busy checking his emails, answering late-night work calls, disappearing into his office. I kept hoping, begging, even for him to notice that I was slipping away, to fight for me. But all I ever got were small, dismissive comments. "Why are you so sensitive lately? Can't you just handle things while I'm busy? Not everything is about you, Isabelle." He didn't realize that every time he brushed me off like that, he was pushing me further into Liam's waiting arms. And Liam, he knew exactly what was happening. He was patient, subtle. He didn't rush anything. Instead, he found quiet ways to draw me in, slowly filling the void Victor had left behind. One morning, I came downstairs to find a fresh cup of coffee waiting for me, a tiny note stuck to the side of the mug. "Thought you might need a little extra today, Liam." Then it was small bouquets of flowers, nothing extravagant. Simple arrangements he claimed were just because. Every time I tried to object, he'd flash that easy smile and say, "You deserve to feel special once in a while." And I let him. I let him because every gift, every compliment, every stolen glance felt like oxygen after years of suffocating. The way he looked at me, it was intoxicating. His eyes weren't just looking, they were seeing me. Really seeing me. And God help me, I craved that. One afternoon, while Victor was away again, Liam and I sat in the living room, pretending to watch a movie. Halfway through, he leaned in slightly, his voice low and quiet. "I think about you more than I should," he whispered. I felt my stomach flip. My breath caught in my throat. But I didn't move away. Instead, I whispered back, barely audible, "You shouldn't say things like that." He smiled, slow, confident, almost predatory. "But it's true." And I said nothing, because it was true for me too. I should have stopped him. I should have stopped myself. But I didn't. And every day that passed, the line between us faded a little more. And then came the late nights. Victor had flown out again for another week-long business trip. The house felt emptier than ever. Liam knocked softly on my door that first evening, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Can I keep you company tonight?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded. The words felt too dangerous to speak aloud. We sat in the kitchen, sipping wine under the soft glow of the overhead lights. The conversation started light, but gradually grew more personal, heavier. "You deserve more, Isabelle," Liam said softly, tracing his finger along the rim of his glass. You deserve to be loved the way you deserve. And he's not giving you that. I looked away, blinking back the emotion rising in my chest. It's not that simple, I whispered. Isn't it? His voice was barely above a whisper. You're starving for something you should have never been denied. And I see you. Every day, I see how strong you are, but how much you're hurting. His hand reached across the table, gently resting on top of mine. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes for a moment and allowed myself to feel the warmth of his touch. It wasn't even the physical connection that undid me, it was the fact that he noticed, that he cared enough to see what Victor never could. The nights continued like that. More wine, more conversations that drifted dangerously close to the edge. His hand would brush against my arm, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Every touch sent sparks through my body, igniting something I thought had died years ago. I started finding excuses to be around him. Cooking dinner when I knew Victor wasn't home. Sitting in the living room longer than necessary. Pretending I needed help carrying in groceries. Always small things, but intentional. Because as much as I tried to tell myself it was innocent, it wasn't. One night, after another long, quiet conversation, I stood up to go to bed. My heart was pounding, the wine had left a gentle warmth in my chest, and I could feel the tension humming between us like electricity. I took one step toward the hallway, but before I could fully turn, he moved closer, close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. You're only pretending to resist, he whispered. My body froze. The words hit something deep inside me, something raw and vulnerable that I had tried to keep buried. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't resisting. Not really. And for the first time, I stopped pretending. Victor left again. Another last-minute trip, another vague explanation that didn't even pretend to consider how I felt. I watched him pack his suitcase in silence. He didn't ask if I'd be okay. He didn't apologize for leaving. He barely kissed my cheek before walking out the door like it was just another Tuesday. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the house shifted. It was like the emptiness itself became a living thing, thick, heavy, humming quietly in every corner. I stood at the top of the stairs for a while, listening to the quiet, feeling the pull inside me grow stronger with every passing second. I tried to distract myself, poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch with a book I couldn't focus on. The words on the page blurred together as my mind replayed every moment, every touch, every whisper Liam had given me over the past few weeks. The air felt charged, like a storm was about to break, but I couldn't see where or how. Just that it was coming. I heard his footsteps long before I saw him. Soft, slow, measured. Then, there was a quiet knock on my bedroom door. Isabelle? His voice was low, careful, almost testing. I should have told him to leave. I should have told him this had gone too far already. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "Come in." He opened the door gently and stepped inside, closing it behind him. The only light came from the small lamp on my nightstand, casting a warm glow that made everything feel softer. More intimate. More dangerous. He stood there for a moment, just looking at me, and I looked back. Fully aware of the thin, fragile line we were about to break forever. I couldn't sleep, he said softly. Neither could I. Without another word, he stepped closer, and I felt my breath quicken. My heart was pounding so loudly I was certain he could hear it. He reached out, brushing his fingers along my cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear like he had done so many times before, but this time, his hand didn't fall away. It lingered, his thumb gently tracing my jawline. The warmth of his touch burned through my skin. You don't have to pretend anymore, he whispered. I swallowed hard, my voice barely holding steady. This is wrong, Liam. But you don't want me to stop. I couldn't respond. Because he was right. My body ached for the very thing my mind was screaming against. The years of neglect, of being invisible, of hungering for something more, had brought me to this edge. And I was tired of standing at the edge. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. And in that moment, he whispered the words that broke whatever resistance I still had left inside me. "Don't fight it, just come for me." The room spun. Every ounce of guilt, every flicker of hesitation dissolved beneath the overwhelming wave of desire that crashed into me. And I surrendered. There was no more pretending, no more moral debates, no more desperate attempts to rationalize or justify or resist. As our bodies met, so did every ounce of guilt I thought I could suppress. But it was too late. The forbidden thrill of it consumed me entirely. I felt weightless and heavy all at once, floating in a space that was both intoxicating and terrifying. The warmth of his skin against mine, the way he held me like I was precious, desired, craved, it was everything I had been denied for so long. But behind every breath, behind every kiss, behind every touch, there was something else pulsing beneath the surface. The knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. When it was over, we lay in silence. The kind of silence that says everything words never could. My chest was tight, not from regret yet, but from the overwhelming awareness that the boundary had been crossed. Completely. Permanently. The very air around us felt different, thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Like the weight of what we had done was pressing down on both of us, daring us to acknowledge it. But neither of us spoke, because saying it out loud would have made it too real too soon. Instead, I closed my eyes, desperately trying to savor the twisted comfort his arms offered me, while a quiet storm of guilt already began swirling deep inside my stomach. The morning after, the house felt foreign. I woke up before Liam, staring at the ceiling as the weight of what we had done settled into my chest like wet cement. The early light poured in through the half-closed blinds, but it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a countdown had started, one I could no longer control. I carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake him. My legs trembled as I tiptoed into the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror, at the woman staring back, who barely resembled me anymore. My skin was flushed, my hair tangled, my eyes wide with something between shame and hunger. How did I get here? I splashed cold water on my face, hoping it might wash away the guilt. But the feeling clung to me, like a second skin I couldn't peel off. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Liam was awake, sitting up, watching me. He didn't speak. He just smiled, a slow, satisfied grin that sent a fresh wave of panic through my chest. That smile didn't belong to the boy who had comforted me over wine and whispered gentle things in the dark. It belonged to a man who had just crossed a line and liked it. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words died in my throat. The silence between us said enough. For a moment, I thought maybe he would leave the room, give us both space to breathe, to pretend like nothing happened. But instead, he stood up and crossed the room toward me. He placed his hand gently on my waist, pulling me close, and whispered, "You don't have to be afraid." But I was. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. The boy who once looked at me with longing now looked at me with possession. That afternoon, Victor returned. The moment I heard the front door open, my stomach turned violently. My palms broke out in sweat. I pasted on a smile I could barely hold as Victor walked in, suitcase in hand, already talking about his meetings as though we'd been living in separate worlds. And in many ways, we had. He kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and made some offhand remark about how exhausted he was. He didn't notice the trembling in my hands or the hollow ring in my laugh. Liam was in the kitchen when Victor walked in, cool and calm like nothing had happened. But his eyes met mine, and in that single glance, I knew everything had changed. Later that evening, as Victor sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through his emails, my phone buzzed quietly in my lap. It was from Liam. Last night was real. And it's not over. My heart raced. My hands shook as I quickly flipped my phone face down. Victor glanced over, barely noticing. Work stuff, he asked casually. I forced a small laugh. Just some notifications. But inside, I was crumbling. It was no longer a secret. It was a ticking bomb. The following days blurred into one long stretch of emotional quicksand. Every moment with Victor felt like playing Russian roulette, constantly terrified that something would give me away. That a slip of the tongue, a look, a misstep would expose everything. The guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. At night, I tossed and turned in bed beside Victor, unable to sleep, my mind replaying every second of that forbidden night. I would catch glimpses of Liam in the mornings, and every glance carried a weight I couldn't bear. But what terrified me more than the guilt was the desire that still lived inside me. I hated myself for craving the stolen glances, the loaded text messages, the way Liam's presence made my body react without permission. I hated that every time Victor's hand brushed mine and left no spark, I longed for the electricity that Liam's touch had burned into my skin. And Liam? He only grew bolder. It started with subtle, almost innocent comments whenever Victor was around. Victor would be reading the paper and Liam would casually remark, "You look really beautiful today, Isabelle," his eyes locked on mine in a way Victor never noticed. Or he'd pass behind me in the kitchen, letting his hand briefly graze my lower back, lingering just long enough to make my pulse spike. Victor remained oblivious, which only made it worse. The weight of the secret began to crush me. I couldn't eat. My appetite vanished. Food turned to ash in my mouth. My clothes started to hang looser on my frame. My face grew pale from restless nights filled with nightmares, dreams where Victor found out, where everything exploded, where I lost everything. Some nights, I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing like I was running from something I couldn't escape. And always, Liam was there like a shadow I couldn't shake. One afternoon, while Victor was out running errands, Liam cornered me in the hallway. His voice was low, steady, dangerously calm. "You're mine now," he whispered. His hand gripped my wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough that I felt the edge of his control. "You can't pretend this didn't happen. You don't want to pretend." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Liam," I whispered, my voice cracking. He stepped closer, his breath warm against my face. "You don't want to stop," he said softly. "You're scared, but you don't want to stop." And the worst part? Part of me didn't. I didn't know whether I was being loved or trapped. Was he offering me the connection I had starved for? Or was he tightening a noose around my neck, knowing I'd never escape without tearing my entire life apart? The lines between passion and possession blurred more every day. The guilt, the thrill, the fear. They fused into one single, suffocating emotion I couldn't name anymore. And somewhere deep inside I knew this wasn't going to stay hidden forever. You know, sometimes I still sit here wondering, was I the victim of my own loneliness? Was Liam the one who took advantage? Or did I open that door wide for him to walk through? I mean, have you ever been so starved for affection, for attention, for something real that you accepted it from the wrong person? From someone you knew you shouldn't? When someone finally looks at you, really sees you, after years of being invisible, it feels like air filling starving lungs. But is that love? Or is it weakness? Is the person who tempts you more to blame? Or does the blame fall on the one who gives in? The one who lets the forbidden in and never closes the door? I don't have the answers. I'm still living with the weight of it every single day. But maybe you do. I need your honest thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back. Tell me, where does responsibility truly fall? On the seducer? Or the willing? And if these kinds of stories make you reflect on your own hidden scars, if you want to hear more real stories that cross dangerous lines, subscribe to Crossing Lines right now. Because some truths are only shared here. You know, desire is a funny thing. When you've been drowning long enough, even poisoned water starts to feel like rescue. You'll take any hand that reaches down, not caring if it's pulling you up or dragging you deeper. That's what Liam was for me. At first, He felt like a lifeline. A spark I hadn't felt in years. A breath of life in a house where I'd felt invisible for so long. But the truth is, he wasn't saving me. He was the undertow. Once I crossed that line, once I let myself fall into his arms, there was no going back. No erasing it. No undoing what had been done. And now, I live in the shadow of that moment. Every day. Sometimes I wonder if Victor suspects. Sometimes I think Liam still waits for me to break again. And sometimes, I wonder if I'm still addicted to the danger even now. Desire can feel like rescue. But sometimes, it's just the undertow pulling you deeper. I crossed a line I can never uncross. And I'm still living in its shadow. You've heard my story. Now it's your turn to speak.